There is something about Prince William that almost nobody talks about. Not the charity work, not the royal duties, not the suits, the speeches, or the carefully managed public appearances. Something far more interesting than any of that. Right now, today, Prince William is the largest private landowner in England. His name sits on the title deeds of nearly 130,000 acres of British countryside. Ancient moorland in Devon, flower fields on a remote Atlantic island chain, a famous organic farm in the Cotswolds, dense woodland in Herefordshire, and miles of Cornish coastline stretching further than the eye can see. Every single year, that land pays him close to £23 million. Most people have no idea this exists. They know William as a future king, a father, a public figure. But behind all of that is a completely different story. The story of a man running one of the oldest and most powerful agricultural empires in British history. It is called the Duchy of Cornwall. It has been running for nearly 700 years. It is worth well over £1 billion. And it shapes the lives of hundreds of farming families, entire communities, and vast stretches of the English countryside in ways that rarely make the headlines. To understand what William controls, you need to go back nearly 7 centuries. In 1337, an English king named Edward III created something the country had never seen before. He took an enormous collection of land and property, bound it together under a single legal structure, and gave it a single purpose: to provide every future heir to the British throne with an independent income. The first person to receive it was a 7-year-old boy. His name was Edward of Woodstock. History knows him as the Black Prince. He became the first Duke of Cornwall. And every duke since has automatically inherited the same estate, the same ancient legal rights, and the same responsibility. Prince William is the 25th Duke of Cornwall. He received the title in September 2022, the moment his father became King Charles III, and with it came one of the most extraordinary inheritances in modern British history. The estate covers approximately 128,922 acres, spread across 19 counties of England and Wales. To put that in perspective, it is more land than the entire county of Oxfordshire. It is roughly 205 square miles of moorland, farmland, woodland, coastline, and island territory, all under the stewardship of one man. What makes the duchy truly unlike anything else is how it has survived and grown while everything around it declined. In the 1880s, it covered around 74,000 acres. Today, it covers almost 130,000. Most great British estates shrank dramatically over the 20th century. Inheritance taxes and economic pressure broke them apart. The duchy kept growing because it is exempt from inheritance tax, corporation tax, and capital gains tax. The legal structure is also unusual. William does not own the land the way a normal person owns property. He holds what is legally called an interest in possession. He receives the income. He cannot sell the assets for personal gain. He cannot put Tintagel Castle on the market to fund a private purchase. Any transaction worth more than £500,000 requires Treasury approval. The annual accounts are laid before Parliament. This is a medieval institution operating under modern scrutiny, and it has worked that way for nearly 700 years. The financial scale is significant. The estate is valued at approximately £1.26 billion. In the 2024 to 2025 financial year, it generated a personal income for William of £22.9 million. That money funds everything: his official duties, his household, Princess Catherine, and the private upbringing of Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. There is no government salary, no separate allowance. The duchy is the family's entire financial foundation. More than 150 people run the day-to-day operation. There are over 700 agricultural tenancies, more than 600 residential lettings. William chairs the governing body, the Prince's Council, and sets the strategic direction for the whole estate. He does not personally farm the land, but every major decision, every significant investment, and every shift in policy across 130,000 acres ultimately flows through him. If you want to understand the scale of this empire in a way that actually feels real, drive into Devon and climb onto Dartmoor. More than half the entire duchy by landmass is concentrated right here. Williams holdings on and around Dartmoor total over 70,000 acres. That single block of land is larger than many European cities. It includes more than 50,000 acres of common land that local farming families have grazed for centuries. Over 17,000 acres of that land is actively farmed today. Stretches of the East and West Dart rivers belong to the estate. So do 50 houses, 5 pubs, 4 hotels, and a large section of moorland leased to the British Ministry of Defence as a military training ground, an arrangement going back to the 1800s. There are 21 tenant farms on Dartmoor. Every one of them raises livestock, beef cattle, sheep, and the famous Dartmoor ponies, because the thin, acidic, granite soil of the high moor makes growing crops almost impossible. These are not modern industrial operations. They are traditional upland farms built around the same landscape rhythms that have governed farming here for 1,000 years. 2 of those farms carry a special designation. The Duchy calls them focus farms, flagship operations chosen to test new sustainable methods and then share what they learned with the rest of the estate. The first is Brimpts Farm, 700 acres sitting inside Dartmoor National Park. It carries a South Devon cattle herd, a breed native to this corner of England, and manages some of the most species-rich pastures on the entire estate. These are old meadows that have never been ploughed, never treated with artificial chemicals. They are full of wildflowers, insects, and birds that have almost completely disappeared from modern farmland everywhere else. In 2009, the farm installed a biomass boiler, which led to the creation of the Dartmoor Wood Fuel Cooperative, a network of local farms generating shared renewable energy from the land around them. The second focus farm is Huckerby, over 1,000 acres. South Devon cattle, North Country Cheviot sheep, and something genuinely rare, a pedigree herd of Dartmoor ponies. These animals are listed as vulnerable by the Rare Breeds Survival Trust. They are among the rarest native horses in Britain. Maintaining a breeding herd here on a working farm is not a publicity exercise. It is a serious commitment to keeping alive something that is close to disappearing forever. In 2024, the farmers at Huckerby received a major conservation award, recognizing the biodiversity work they have built into their daily operation, proof that a farm can produce food and restore the natural world at the same time. Beyond the farms, the Duchy has been doing something even larger on Dartmoor. By the end of 2025, nearly 3,000 acres of degraded peatland had been brought back to life in partnership with conservation organisations. Peatland stores carbon more effectively than woodland, acre for acre. Restoring it matters enormously for climate targets. And separately, a curlew recovery project, working to bring back a rare wading bird whose distinctive call had almost completely vanished from these hills, was beginning to show its first real signs of success.
We Buy Books is the hassle-free way to turn your unwanted books, CDs, DVDs and video games into cash, and it couldn't be easier. Just download our app, scan the barcode and get an instant valuation. Print off a postage label supplied and post them for free. Using our collection service, we can even pick up your unwanted items straight from your door. Sit back, relax and get paid. With the highest payouts on the web, there's no need to go anywhere else. The We Buy Books mobile app. Download today.
Travel northeast into the Cotswolds and you arrive at a farm with a story that goes far beyond its boundaries. Broadfield Farm, 1,050 acres of organic land in Gloucestershire sitting next to Highgrove House, the country home long associated with King Charles III. In 1986, then Prince Charles made a decision that the British farming world considered borderline ridiculous. He converted the entire property to organic production. Organic farming in the mid-1980s was not respected. It was dismissed as uneconomical, impractical, and nostalgic. Agricultural experts said it would not work at scale. Charles's answer was simple. If the Duchy of Cornwall cannot afford to try, then who can? It worked. Over the decades that followed, Broadfield Farm became one of the most visited and most studied organic farms in the country. Farmers came from across Britain to learn from what was happening here. The farm helped move organic agriculture from the fringes of British food culture towards something the mainstream began to take seriously. Its influence on what ended up on supermarket shelves across the country is real and lasting. Today, the farm carries approximately 220 pedigree Ayrshire dairy cows, chosen because they thrive on grass-based, low-input systems. Their milk goes to Waitrose under the Duchy Organic brand. There is also a beef herd combining Aberdeen Angus, British White, and Gloucestershire cattle. The Gloucestershire breed is endangered. Keeping them here is partly agriculture, partly conservation. The farm is now managed by Henry James Gay, who took over in 2020 on a 25-year lease. His family has farmed under the Duchy of Cornwall since 1525. That is 500 unbroken years on the same estate. He has added regenerative practices on top of the existing organic system: reduced tillage, companion cropping, wildlife ponds, and the farm continues to supply the Waitrose Duchy Organic range without interruption. The commercial scale of what grew from this single farm is worth pausing on. Waitrose Duchy Organic now carries over 250 products: cheddar, Stilton, free-range pork, organic carrots, and the original Oaten biscuits, whose recipe has not changed since 1990. The brand generates roughly £3 million every year for the King Charles III Charitable Fund. Total donations from the brand have now passed £50 million. One farm, one decision made in 1986. £50 million raised for charity, and a shift in how an entire country thinks about food. North of the Cotswolds in Herefordshire, the Duchy's farming ambition takes a different form. Over 13,000 acres of predominantly Grade 2 farmland, one of the most productive agricultural land classifications in England, spread across 27 tenant farms. This is serious food-producing country, and the Duchy has been using it to explore something that is quietly becoming one of the most important ideas in modern agriculture: the health of the soil beneath our feet. The standout farm here is Lower Blakemere, 630 acres near Hereford. William himself visited to see the work firsthand. The farm runs a 9-year crop rotation and carries a beef cattle herd. But what makes it genuinely interesting is what the farmers have stopped doing. They have largely stopped ploughing. Instead of turning the soil over mechanically, which disrupts the complex biological world living in the ground, they use composting techniques designed to produce material rich in the fungi and bacteria that healthy soil depends on to function. They use fermentation methods in the cattle sheds to transform manure into something far more biologically useful than standard compost. The soil at Lower Blakemere is rebuilding its own natural complexity. It stores more carbon. It holds more water. It produces crops with less reliance on external chemical inputs every year. It sounds simple, but multiplied across hundreds of farms across 130,000 acres, the difference it makes to carbon storage, water management, and long-term land productivity is enormous. Nearby, a 950-acre farm called Monkhall has been offered on a 25-year regenerative tenancy beginning in 2026. That length of commitment is deliberate. Real ecological recovery takes decades, not years. Giving a farmer 25 years of security means they can afford to invest in the land in ways that a short-term tenant simply cannot. The incoming farmer receives dedicated Duchy support in soil health and carbon reduction. Infrastructure includes widespread irrigation and a large cold storage facility for potatoes. This is long-term thinking built into the legal structure of a farming tenancy. Nothing in this empire is stranger or more quietly beautiful than what happens on the Isles of Scilly. 28 miles off the tip of Cornwall, further into the Atlantic than Land's End, lies a scattered collection of 200 islands. 5 are inhabited. The rest are wild, windswept, and largely untouched. The total population across all 5 inhabited islands is around 2,500 people. Tourism and farming drive almost everything in their economy. Prince William, through the Duchy, owns approximately 75% of the entire landmass. He also owns around a third of all the residential housing across the islands. For a community of 2,500 people, that concentration of land and property ownership is remarkable even by the standards of the Duchy itself. The island's main agricultural industry is narcissus farming, daffodils. The mild Atlantic climate and the light sandy soil make the Scillies perfect for growing early-season flowers. The industry was well established by the 1860s. By 1900, over 40 tons of flowers were being shipped from these islands to London markets every single week. The scale has fallen since then. Competition from imported flowers changed the economics, but duchy tenants still work the small, hedge-bordered flower fields that give this landscape its distinctive character. And they still produce narcissi weeks earlier than anywhere on the British mainland. The uninhabited islands are where the most extraordinary arrangement of all plays out. In 1995, the duchy granted a 99-year lease covering all the uninhabited islets and untenanted coastal land across the archipelago to the Isles of Scilly Wildlife Trust. The trust manages thousands of acres of coastland containing 26 sites of special scientific interest, marine conservation zones, and special areas of conservation. Rare migratory birds stop here on transatlantic journeys. Plant species grow on these rocks that exist nowhere else in Britain. The annual rent that the Wildlife Trust pays to Prince William for this 99-year lease is one daffodil, a single flower, delivered once a year. In an age of institutional land funds, corporate landlords, and billion-pound property portfolios, William receives one daffodil a year for an entire Atlantic archipelago. It is feudal, poetic, and completely real. Everything up to this point paints a picture of responsible, forward-thinking stewardship. Then came Bradninch. In March 2026, the duchy announced it would sell 10 farms from the Bradninch estate in mid-Devon, an ancient cluster of properties that has been duchy land since the Black Prince himself. Sitting tenants were offered first refusal before the farms went to the open market. The farming families involved did not feel grateful. They felt betrayed. Some had worked the same land for generations. One farmer explained that buying the freehold was financially impossible without burdening his family with debt for decades. Another raised a point that was difficult to ignore. Just a year earlier, William had become the royal patron of We Are Farming Minds, a charity dedicated to addressing the mental health crisis in British agriculture, where suicide rates among farmers are deeply alarming. The same man who publicly championed that cause was now, through his estate, generating the kind of stress and uncertainty that the charity exists to address. The duchy's chief executive defended the sale as strategic rationalisation, selling where impact is limited, reinvesting where greater results are possible. The Tenant Farmers Association acknowledged the reasoning and called it deeply disappointing. Bradninch matters because it reveals the real tension inside this empire. William is a committed environmentalist. He is a vocal supporter of farmer welfare. He is also the director of a commercial portfolio worth over £1 billion. When those three things pull in different directions, someone always ends up on the wrong side of the decision. And in Bradninch, it was the farmers. William has made one commitment the centrepiece of his management of the duchy. The entire estate will reach net zero emissions by 2032. Not reduced, eliminated. Across every farm, every woodland, and every property on 130,000 acres of English countryside. The 2025 Integrated Impact Report shows the early progress. More than 400 hectares of new habitat created in a single year. Around 75 farms, 40% of all let farms on the estate, have received detailed emissions assessments, and 65% of those have already cut their output as a result. The Duchy employs 2 dedicated soil advisors who travel across the entire estate, because healthy soil stores carbon and degraded soil releases it, and that difference, multiplied across 130,000 acres, matters enormously. £3 million invested in environmental programs in a single year. 3 megawatts of renewable energy capacity installed. But step back from the numbers for a moment and look at what this empire actually is. The Duchy has survived pandemics, civil wars, world wars, the complete transformation of the British economy across 7 centuries. It doubled in size while every comparable estate around it declined. It holds ancient legal rights that most people do not know exist. Ownership of Cornwall's entire foreshore, the riverbeds of its rivers, and a medieval inheritance law meaning that anyone dying in Cornwall without a will passes their estate to the Duchy rather than to the Crown. It owns Tintagel Castle, Dartmoor Prison, the land beneath the Oval Cricket Ground in London, Duchy property since 1337. 270 ancient monuments are scheduled across the estate by English heritage. This is not simply wealth. This is an institution woven into the physical, legal, and cultural fabric of England in ways that most people have never had reason to consider. And it now sits with a man who has inherited not just the land and the income, but the full weight of everything those 700 years represent. Somewhere on Dartmoor tonight, a curlew is calling for the first time in 50 years. Somewhere in the Cotswolds, Ayrshire cows are grazing the same organic pastures that help change how a country thinks about food. Somewhere on the Isles of Scilly, a single daffodil is being prepared as the annual rent payment for an entire archipelago. 1 medieval charter, £1 billion empire, one man standing between the past and the future of the English countryside, and a story that is far from finished.